Hello, MC Stu here, back with another STO video. Normally I do mainly how-to videos. Today I wanted to go over Ba'ul Antiproton weapons and whether or not they are still good after the nerf that we got a week or so back. So I'm just going to go over the build that I have, and then we'll take a look at a pug run ISA and take a look at the parse and see if they are still viable. So if you don't know, what was happening is radiant detonation and Kemocite lace weapons were proccing off of the refraction of the Ba'ul weapons heavily and creating a pretty big imbalance. Some of the numbers that people were getting out of that was just insane. And so they changed the way that that works. They no longer proc off of that refraction. I believe it was doing it almost 100% of the time. So in an ISE elite run, we were seeing numbers with particularly Kemocite laced weaponry in the 70k range, which is just a ton. So it was identified as cheese pretty quick, and that has been changed. So I just wanted to go over whether or not it's still worthwhile using the Ba'ul Antiproton weapons. So let's take a look at the build that I have here. This is a beam overload build, and I'm using Ba'ul weapons all across the front except for the Dark Matter Quantum Torpedo. I am using that along with the Lorca console for the two-piece, and it's a pretty good torpedo as well. Let's take a look at that. So this is going to give us some stacking critical severity. 20 seconds stacks up to 25 times. So pretty good chunk you get out of that fairly quickly. So it's a good two-piece set to have, even if you're not a big torpedo fan. I was originally running this with 5, and I'm able to get better numbers, not because this is necessarily doing more damage, but because of that two-piece. It's complementing the entire build with that extra critical severity. I only have one of these at Epic in the front, and most of these I've tried my best to get all damage mods, but I'm still working on that. Using the pretty standard energy weapons space set here. So we have the deflector from the colony, mainly for the critical chance, critical severity. The competitive engine, this will give you the speed boosts and turn rate while using a specialty firing mode, tactical firing mode. This is the first time I've used this. I was watching one of Augie's videos last week, and I noticed he's been using this core quite a bit, so I decided to go ahead and try it out, especially with a beam overload build, because it gives additional power to your subsystems, and it allows for that cap to go above what you normally would get at 125. So with beam overload, when you're in that firing mode, it sucks quite a bit of power from the weapons, and losing power from your weapons down here makes a big difference on the amount of damage output that you can do. So far I'm liking this core. This is not at Epic yet either. Got it to the ultra rare, but still working on that. And lastly, for the space set, we're using the Tilly shield. Good shield, good survivability, and then it also gives you some additional, they're not buffs, I guess, but your weapons attack cause enemy shields to receive 11.5 increased damage for 10 seconds. So always a good thing. In the back, I am using a part of the Lobi Ba'ul linked weapons. I'm just using the two-piece on this. I've gone back and forth with using also the torpedo to give me the full three-piece set. When you have the three-piece set, it basically gives you a clicky that will give you 50% bonus damage. And I'm still kind of back and forth because basically if I put that other torpedo on, the two-piece set from this to me is better than having that clicky that I can basically use one time in an ISA run. having this ongoing stack critical severity is beneficial, much more beneficial through the majority of the run than just having that one click that you can do. So I did a couple runs where I swapped it out in the back, but you know, basically that torpedo's not doing much damage except for when I cross through the middle, and it might spray some out the back maybe. So basically all I'm getting out of that was that clicky, and I just was finding it wasn't enough to justify using the 3-piece. I'm also using a omnidirectional Ba'ul. That was not cheap. You could get away with just using a standard antiproton omnidirectional in the back, because the 2-piece for this and for this from the Lobi set, it basically will add that refraction to all of your antiproton weapons, even if they're not Ba'ul weapons. Whether or not that's a huge deal, I don't know. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure that even the 2-piece is still worth it or not, and we'll take a look at that in the parse. Because, I mean, really the only difference between these weapons and regular run-of-the-mill anti-proton weapons is that refraction. So we'll take a look at that when we get to the parse after we take a look at the run. I'm using the kinetic cutting beam from the Omega rep, and I'm using that with the 2-piece here. This console is also very good by itself. This was a forward-firing build, so it made sense to have this in the back, and the 2-piece for it is handy if you can get it to proc. It has a 2.5% chance to give you plus 10 weapons power, which again with beam overload is huge. Plus 500 weapons power drain resistance, and negative 500% weapons power cost. I don't know what that means exactly, because at 100%, I would assume you would have 0 weapons power cost. So at 500, I don't know what that means, but it's good, because 100 would be good, so I'm assuming 500 is even better. But in any case, with a beam overload build, basically what we're getting from this is more power and less drain on the power consumption. All right, let's take a look at devices. So I'm using the Duranium Surplus. This is basically an additional speed boost clicky. I am using the battery for energy amplifier for the extra 20% bonus damage to energy weapons. We're using the subspace field modulator. This is a defensive console, so it's giving you quite a bit of damage resistance when clicking that. I want to say it's proton defensive. Yeah, no, this doesn't act as a quote or a cloak. So clicky for additional damage resistance. This comes from an Iconium mission. I put it on here, but I never use it. I have it on my tanks as well. And even when I do use it, if I'm getting hammered and I click that, it'll pop my health up for like a split second. And if I'm still getting hammered, then it doesn't really make a big difference. So I'm kind of mixed on whether or not, how helpful this is on my tactical characters. When I have this many slots with that new ship upgrade, the X, I got to fill it with something. So that's what I've put there. And then I'm using the Kobayashi Kobayashi Maru. Oh, that is correct. And I'm popping this right at the beginning, and then anytime it comes up for the passive buff, so that it hands out to yourself and your team. Next is the Lorca console. Main reason for this is that extra critical chance. You also get additional weapons power settings and shield penetration. Great console, especially with the 2-piece with the torpedo. Next is the second part of the Ba'ul Lobi set console. This is giving us additional anti-proton damage and additional hull capacity, as well as that 2-piece where any non-Ba'ul anti-proton damage weapon will also have refraction. Next, what do we have here? I can't even pronounce that. Swarmer. The swarm processor. This is here for that extra almost 4% critical chance, And accuracy, I don't know if that's a huge deal on a beam overload, but the reason I have it on here is for the critical chance. Simulated module, again from the Omega set, touched on this earlier for the 2-piece. This gives you crit chance and crit severity. It gives you some control, a couple other things that aren't a real big deal. For this particular build, plus 5% weapon power setting is nice as well. We have another Lobi console, the tachyokinetic converter, and this is here for the additional crit chance, crit severity, and turn rate, which is nice. All right, next we have the binaural infused circuitry, and this is here for the massive amount of critical severity it gives you. At Epic, it's 26.2%, which is huge. You get some hull capacity and some control expertise. DPRM, and this comes from, what is it, the Atlas ship. If you're a Romulan, you can pick it up off the exchange. Same for KDF. You're getting some damage resistance. You're getting some directed energy weapon damage boost. This is mainly here for the clicky. Clicky is a get out of jail free card if you're dying. It'll bring you back up to life real quick, and once you are over 80% health, it gives you 40% bonus damage, and that's all damage. So you can use this on pretty much any build out there: science, torp boats, cannon, any kind of directed energy weapons. Great console. I just started experimenting with this on this particular build. This particular ship with the mastery it has, it's not super great for the critical chance and severity, so I decided to go ahead with this. This comes off the Jem'Hadar flight deck cruiser. This is it's not a Lobi, is it a Lobi? It's a Lobi ship, I believe. Main reason I have this on here is for that 15% energy weapon damage and for the 8% critical severity. The clicky is pretty nice as well. This is going to give you a good amount of damage bonus, flight turn, flight speed, inertia. It's a pretty decent all-around console, actually. I think I'm going to experiment even more with that on some of the my other energy weapon builds. And then we have, let's see here, vulnerability locators. I'm using 3 of those and 1 of the vulnerability exploiters. So let's take a look at the specs on it. I was running Jevanite to boost the hull capacity a little bit for Tyler's duality, which we'll get to that in a moment in the traits. This is a pretty tanky ship for, I guess, it being or looking pretty small. I don't know, is that still running Jevanite? Yeah, the Jevanite is not even currently running right now, and we're sitting at a pretty decent number there. That's actually kind of surprising. Hull regen, nothing super. Shields, don't care about shields. Keep those turned down all the way, especially, if the main things you're doing are ISA. Your shields are going to disappear pretty quick anyways, so it really comes down to your resistance, hull capacity, and at the end of the day, depending on how you're building and playing, if you can destroy them before they can destroy you, then this stuff starts to matter a lot less. Unbuffed, just setting still, we're sitting at 48.1 critical chance and 226 critical severity. Let's take a look at the skill tree. I'm running Strategist along with Intel. Let's go over here. I'll just kind of scroll through this. You can take a look. I think this is the Augie default tree here. Pretty good catch-all setup. I don't know if he does. I put 1 in the hull plating. I like to just try and get a little bit more of that resistance rating in instead of the improved control expertise. So I think that's really the only place it differs from what he has put out there for everybody to use as a recommendation. Traits. We are using Good Day to Die for the additional damage boost. We're using Beam Training. Context is for Kings. We're using Anchored. I just started using this again because I'm a big believer in the resistance ratings and those kinds of things. And I know there's, the whole argument, and I don't want to go into that again. I went on a rant in my last video about the diminishing returns. Yes, those are real, but it doesn't hurt to have some. This gives you a pretty good stacking bonus damage boost when you're not moving, but it also reduces your resistances. So I've kind of been back and forth on that, but for this run and lately I've been back to playing with that a little bit more, and so far that's working out pretty good. We're using Operative for the critical chance, critical severity. We are using Adapted Offense, and this builds crit chance, crit severity. Terran Targeting for the additional crit chance. It does have a debuff for speed. It's really unnoticeable. They could not even write that in there, and most people would have no idea whatsoever. Intelligence Agent Attaché, and this is here on critical strikes. It reduces by 2% your captain's abilities, so attack pattern alpha and all the other basic abilities that come for your particular class. Or this, I believe, is only for tactical, so it reduces all your tactical captain's abilities. And then we're using Fleet Coordinator, so pretty standard here for most builds. I don't know that it would change much if this was a cannon build or anything like that. It'd change a little bit if it was tanking, or if it was a torpedo build. Obviously that would be quite a bit different. Obviously science is a whole nother ball game there. In terms of starship traits, we are using Emergency Weapons Cycle. This is giving us additional firing rate, and it is also giving us a reduction in the power cost when we're firing our weapons, which is huge, especially for beam overload. But if you don't own any ships and you were thinking about buying just one, buy the Arbiter, get this trait. This trait is on every single build that I have except for science mainly and torpedo builds. You will want to use this on everything else that you have. And the ship it comes on is great too, so it's not like you're just buying a ship just to take the trait and never fly it again. Looks good, it's an excellent ship. Next we have this from a Lobi ship, a Zindi ship, I believe, if I remember correctly, and this extends the duration of my beam overload by 5 seconds. So I'm using an Ox to Bat build, and this is basically keeping beam overload up pretty much 100% of the time. All right, next we have preferential targeting, and this is allowing me to use cannon scatter volley, which I don't have any cannons on it, but when I use this and then I use beam overload, it gives me an extra 100% damage to beam overload or cannon rapid fire, which it's not a rapid fire build, but you could use this on a rapid fire build as well. And mix it basically backwards, kind of from how I have it here. So basically, this is on my space bar, spam bar. So I have this ahead of this guy, and that would boost this ability by that 100% by activating that first. So when I I guess I already clicked it, but when I click all through it, it would go in that order. And that's where it would put us at quite a bit. That's 21,000 anti-proton damage there for a second. So not bad, not a bad trait at all. Supercharged weapons. This is pretty much all of my builds. I'm not a huge, say, torpedo fan, but if you have this trait, you'll want to use a torpedo. Every time it fires, it's going to give you a stack of this, and it's 10% damage, 1.5 critical chance, and 6.6 critical severity. And it stacks up to 3 times, lasts 20 seconds. So as long as your torpedo is, if your torpedo is firing every, let's just say, 8 seconds, within 24 seconds you'll have the full stack of this, and as long as you're staying in combat and fighting, this is going to stay up at that full 3 stacks. So that's huge. Next we have overpowered and overgunned. Depending on where your critical chance is, I think the max is 50%. That'll change how long this will stay up. So basically using a beam or cannon special firing mode, you will get negative 15% power cost reduction, and you will get an additional 12.5 firing haste. So weapons beam overload firing faster, and beam overload fires slower by its nature. So anything you can do to increase that firing cycle haste is going to be beneficial. This build's not at the full 50% critical chance, and that's why the duration, if you look on here, is 9.8 seconds as opposed to 10. So if you're at 50%, you would be at the full 10 seconds. Lastly, starship traits, we have Strike from Shadows, and this is mainly here to reduce threat. Well, actually all of it's good. Reduce your threat by 60%, which is big, and then additional 5% critical chance and 5% bonus damage. This is a very good trait. Most of these higher end DPS builds don't have a lot in the way of heals and things like that, so reducing the threat and just taking less damage is really, you know, the way to stay alive, since if you start getting focused on, there's not a lot you can do to fix yourself right away. So avoiding damage, resistances, things like that are going to be extremely beneficial for you if you're doing a really high output DPS build. Space reputation traits, we are using, which one does this come from? I can't remember off the top of my head. Advanced targeting, plus 20% critical severity. This one I believe comes from the Romulan trait, and this is giving us, our Romulan rep, this is giving us additional 5% critical hit chance. And I left Radiant Detonation on here because I wanted to see what it would do on a run like this. This was an ISA that I did, not an ISE. I would be seeing anywhere between 8 to 10k DPS just from this here, from the refraction, and over 20 to 30. It was doing basically about half of what Kemocite laced weapons was doing prior to the nerf, and so I left it on here because I just kind of wanted to see where we were at with that now, and then we'll take a look at that in the parse. Tyler's Duality, based on your hull capacity, this has given us additional critical chance. That's where the Jevonite comes in. That'll help you stay alive with a little bit of a larger pool of hit points, and then it also is giving us additional critical chance by boosting that hull capacity there a little bit. This comes from the Discovery rep. All right, this comes from the Gamma rep, and this is just a straight 6.3% bonus weapons damage boost. All right, active space reputation. So the main ones here that are important, some of these are just, I don't have anything else to use, like this guy here. Sometimes this will do okay damage. It's more of kind of a science-based ability. The main ones that I really rely on are going to be this one here, and this almost acts like a cloak. So again, you know, we're talking about avoiding that damage. If I'm starting to get focused, then I'm going to click this, and it's going to make them not pay attention to me or be able to see me. So damage avoidance. This here, I think this just makes me feel better when it goes off. It's, you know, helping with that shield restoration, but again, shields, I'm not really doing much with those anyway, so whether I have them or don't have them, it doesn't make a real big difference. But, you know, if the team's close around, especially at the end, we're hitting the gate and the attack cube, that could be beneficial to your team as well. This one I rely on quite a bit. I'll normally use this when I'm coming in to start attacking the gate before I turn around to the attack cube. And again, this is a damage avoidance. So this goes up and it basically generates threat to the enemy. So that they're not looking at you. If you're doing an organized run with a team that has a tank, you're not going to want to use this because this could take that threat from the tank. And with the tank not being hit, they start to lose a lot of their bonuses and things. When you build a tank, you're building it in a way where you're getting bonuses and buffs by taking that damage, and so by using this you could really hurt them. So I won't run this if I'm running an ISE with, you know, an organized team, but otherwise in a pug run, again, another damage avoidance ability here. Let's take a look at the stations. So I still have Kemocite in here. Again, I wanted to kind of see where we're at with that, whether or not it is still beneficial to have in the build. We're using attack pattern beta. This is always a go-to for that damage resistance reduction from the or to the enemy. Good ability to have. I have it on anything that I can fit it on. So it's pretty rare where something will take precedence over making sure that that's fit in there. Torpedo spread, since we have a torpedo on the front. And then we're using the cannon scatter volley. And again, that is just to proc the trait that I have, preferential targeting. So it gives 100% damage increase to beam overload. All three of these also will give me additional flight speed and turn rate. Let's look at engineering here. We're using Let It Go for the -5 on all damage resistance. And then it also gives cold damage. Sometimes this does okay. If you mix this with very cold in space, which I am, it can do pretty well. So I'll normally click this and then this. And that tends to do pretty decent amount of damage if it's being timed out right with some of the other abilities that you have. Concentrated firepower, I use this because I just had the extra slot and there's a torpedo on there, so why not? We'll take a look at that and see how it did. But with this particular ship having the command seating, I just really didn't have anything that, you know, was, I guess, going to be better than this. There might be better stuff out there. I'm not saying, yeah, use that if that's available, but it's a placeholder. So we'll take a look and see how that did. Emergency power to weapons. This is a must-have for any energy weapon build. Even if you only had, you know, one engineering slot and you're running energy weapons, you want this. So this is giving you a bonus damage boost in emergency weapon or emergency power to weapons 3. It's 16.3%, and it's also giving us a plus 40% power setting for 30 seconds. So that's again huge with beam overload. I have auxiliary to batteries, and again that's for the aux to bat for the cooldown. I have the duty officers for that, so that's keeping all of these abilities rotating as quickly as possible. Emergency power to engines. This does not give you a huge speed boost, but this actually procs a duty officer that I have. So if I use evasive maneuvers, which I do a lot, once that is done, and I generally find I need to wait a couple seconds of it working through its cooldown, so maybe 2 or 3 seconds, and then I'll click emergency power to engines, and it'll cool this down 100% all the way to 0, ready to use again. But if this just ends and you click that right away, I find sometimes it like misfires or doesn't work. I don't know that that's intended because it doesn't say anything about it, but if you are going to use that setup, which I recommend, I use it on every single thing I have. Make sure that you wait for this to get to, you know, a second or two of the cooldown before you click the emergency power to engines. Otherwise, you might have a misfire there. All right, and then we have hazard emitters. This is here for, I mean, the heal's kind of whatever. Again, you know, this build isn't really focused on healing. It's focused on killing them before they kill me. But this does proc strategist, I believe it's strategist, and gives you some additional critical chance. Lastly, very cold in space, which I discussed using it in combination with Let It Go. This is a damage over time, basically, cold damage effect, and it also reduces speed, flight, turn of the enemy. This could not be here and it wouldn't make a huge difference, but again, you know, you have so many slots, and on some of these ships, you know, you got to fill it with something. So I use this combination quite a bit on most of my builds. I'd be okay without it, but it's a nice little extra there. All right, let's take a look at duty officers. Pretty straightforward. So I have my 3. I need to get another purple for aux to bat. So having these, when I use auxiliary batteries, it's cooling down bridge officer abilities. As you can see, here's the blue one is 8%. That it cools it down when you click on one of these. The purple is going to be 20, 10%. So I'd get another 2% with this. So with all three of those going, those stacking on each other, I'm able to keep most of these abilities up almost full time. Some of them full time because of other traits like the one that I have for the beam overload that we discussed earlier. This is the duty officer here. This comes from the Phoenix packs. This is the one that emergency power to engines will reduce your evasive maneuvers down to 0. So definitely want this. I think it comes out of a blue Phoenix pack token, and you can just claim one of those out of there. This one here is for additional, let's see, 10% to all damage. This just affects Borg. So that's mainly the stuff I'm running. If I'm playing other missions or other TFOs, this isn't really doing a lot for me, but extra 10% for free, I'll take it. And then this guy's here, he's lower quality. I really didn't have anything else, so I just put this in. It's 2% chance, which is pretty low. But if it procs, that's an extra 10% critical severity buff for 15 seconds, and it can stack up to 3 times if you're lucky enough to hit that 2% chance. So, lastly, so on ground, this is another duty officer you can get from the blue Phoenix tokens, this guy here. And he gives some an additional 5% damage, all damage to Borg. And the nice thing about this is it does both space and ground. So you're able to slot him in your ground. You can only slot him in your ground, but he'll give you an extra 5% in space against Borg as well. So it's like a 7th duty officer slot for space for this particular guy. And it's next to free, depending on if you're opening a lot of the Phoenix pack boxes, real easy to get. I think that is everything except for, let's just take a look at this so you can see where I'm at. I have most of the stuff that I wanted the most, I guess, all the way at 100%. Still got a ways to go on some of the rest of it, but some of the main things, at least for space combat, has already been filled out. You can see as we get lower here, we got, sprint, speed, ground, whatever. Melee, whatever. So that's how we look there for the endeavors. Got just a little bit more I need there for the next one. And this ship overall, I love the way it looks. This is the legendary one. Let's take a little peek at that. Mastery on it. This one I have an X upgrade on it, obviously. So we got survivability. We got some critical severity. I do not believe this had critical chance, more survivability, and I think this was hull. Yep, hull hit points. And I haven't used any of the traits from these. I'm really thinking about doing a tank build on this ship just to see, because it's got quite a few, quite a bit of hit points, and the mastery for it, I think lends itself to being a tank as well. And does it have a tracked? Just maneuvering. No. Doesn't have the tanking command. It's just the one it's missing. So maybe that's a no-go. In any case, so that's the build there. Let's take a look and see how it does in this ISE. ISA. This is just a pug run that I did. So let's take a look at that, and we'll see if they're worthwhile still. We'll be right back.
The situation is grim. All attempts to hail the starbase have failed. We must assume.
let's take a look and see how that one went. Not bad. That's pretty fucking good, actually. I'm really surprised. Even when before the nerf, I think that was just a really good run. I did one before that, and I was about 20k under, so I was still well into the 200k range, but I think that was just a good run. So let's say out of the 3 runs total, all of them were over 200, so we'll just average it out and say 230 out of that build. Flying it halfway decent. I'm not the best pilot in the world. A lot of it's also going to depend on your team, what they're doing. If you have people in there that are doing very well as well, there's only so many hit points that the enemy has for you to take, and then it just comes down to a matter of time. I've still been able to do over 200 with having other people doing around 100 or so. But these guys, even though some of them didn't do very much, they did real well. They went to the left and then they went to the right, and they didn't put gravity welds in the wrong place and those kinds of things. So, you don't have to do tons of damage to be helping the team overall. And I have other tunes where, the DPS isn't what it's about. It's about, support or tanking or things like that. So, if your numbers aren't this high, I mean, this is ridiculous, obviously, but that's okay. Number one, as long as you're having fun, that's all that matters. And number two, you don't have to do even these kind of numbers to be helping the team. These guys were helping the team, and they all did a real good job there. So let's dig into that a little bit more and take a look at how some of these adjustments they made affected things. All right, so Beam Overload 3 from our dual beam banks up front did quite a bit. So we're at 118k, almost 119 between 4 of them. Our Ba'ul Antiproton arrays, which would be the 2 Omnis in the back, did about 24 each under Beam Overload 3, which is pretty decent. Dual beam banks, just firing regular mode, only did about 16k, which makes sense because they didn't spend a lot of time firing in a normal mode because of the way that the ship's built. Beam overload was up the majority of the time, so that makes a lot of sense. Kinetic cutting beam didn't do half bad. It's not the best weapon in the world, but it's a good placeholder, and it's also good depending on your build for that 2-piece. And it carried its weight. 14k is not bad, especially because it's not affected by any of those special firing modes. Dark Matter Lace Torpedo did pretty decent. Again, this is mainly there for that stacking critical severity, along with the Lorca console, but again, still carried its weight. 10k is pretty decent. Pets, we'll look at that in a second. I'm not exactly sure what that is. So Kemocite. So Kemocite on that did 8k, which is pretty damn good. I'm not getting 8k using Kemocite on beam overload phasers. It certainly performs the best still on the Ba'ul weapons. Now, on a run where we were scratching 250k, if this was prior to the nerf, that number would have been 20 to 30k. So it definitely has been nerfed. It is not doing as much, but it's still viable, and that was Kemocite 1. So depending on how you built it, if you went Kemocite 2 or 3, you could probably still improve on that number quite a bit. So I would say even with the nerf Ba'ul weapons with the Kemocite, I think obviously the Ba'ul weapons themselves are doing just fine, and the Kemocite mix with it is still doing good as well, but it's not out of control. I think it's balanced, and they did a good job at doing that. Let's scroll down here. The rest of the stuff's pretty self-explanatory. I want to look at radiant detonations. So radiant detonations is poop. So we did 229 DPS with that. Not K, not nothing. That's bad. In a run like this, before the nerf, that would have been doing about half or so. Sometimes it would do a little bit better than half of Kemocite lace weapons. So before the nerf, this would have been doing 15 to 20K. So when you're stacking both of those, I mean, I was having runs where Kemocite and then Radiant Detonation were the highest, and I would be using that with Fire at Will. That's really how they were cheesing it, or we were cheesing it. I'm guilty. Because you really didn't care about the beam damage. You cared about just hitting as many things as you could with Fire at Will, and the refraction from each of those shots proccing your Radiant Detonation and your Kemocite. So that is not happening anymore. It's not happening on my tank that I use Fire at Will either. Beam overload, it's poop. So that's going away. We won't be using that. And let's just take a quick peek at the pets, because they did okay damage here. And that was the Nimbus, Distress Call, Cryonic Turbulence. That didn't do too bad. Cryonic Turbulence. So that is from, what is it, Very Cold in Space. So that's not bad. So I used it 4 times, so, you know, that was more of a placeholder, but we were getting, what, about 4K DPS out of that. It's not too bad. Not too bad at all. So, given what I'm seeing here, Ba'ul Antiprotons are definitely still viable. I'm sure that some interesting things can be done with the cannon build. I haven't messed with that at all. I am still using it on my main tank, Fire at Will. Like I said, the Kemocite and the Radiant Detonation is way down, but for a tank and trying to attract attention, even with that nerf, having that refraction is huge. And I'll link it in the bottom. It was, I think, 2 videos back. It was a tank build, kind of basic concepts to that, and I show that particular ship in there. And that is still viable. That was made prior to the nerf. And I'm still using it exactly the same way. I did remove the Radiant Detonation, because even on the tank and Fire at Will, that was no good, and I replaced it with something else. I think it was the rep one from Gamma that gives you the additional energy weapons damage. But other than that change, I didn't change anything else for the tanking side. For the DPS side, the beam overload build on the Ba'ul weapons is great. It's just you're not going to be using the cheese build anymore with Fire at Will for a DPS. Fire at Will and DPS don't go together. And I know that might make some people upset, because I know there's some people that can make it work, but it's very hard to do, and using it in the way that people were before no longer works, and rightfully so. So, all right, that's going to wrap it up. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, I'd appreciate that. Check me out on Twitter, on Discord, and also on Twitch. I'll put the links down. Next video, I'll probably be doing a giveaway in that. I'll go into a little more detail on Discord, and also in the video that I put together. So look forward to that. We're going to do a tier 6 token ship giveaway. It's going to be for PC only, and just keep an eye out for that. So thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate it, and we'll catch you next time.